I can't tell you how many companies I've walked into where everybody knows who the problem people are.
Welcome to the Let's Talk Business podcast, a project of the Ptex Group. Gain valuable, actionable ideas from the world's top business leaders to help you take the next step in your business journey. And now, here is your host, Meny Hoffman.
Coming to you from the Ptex headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, this is the podcast for no-nonsense advice to help you learn, grow, and lead. Today, I'm so excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Daren Martin. Dr. Martin is a business strategist, best-selling author, and a trusted advisor to Fortune 500 companies and small businesses alike. In our interview, we dive into the power of company culture, why it's not just part of the game, but it is the game. You'll learn how to assess your company's culture, avoid common pitfalls, and implement the 4 C's, which is call it, craft it, cast it, and cultivate it. Daren also shares why perks are in culture and how real leadership drives lasting change. This is one of my favorite topics. Without further ado, let's get right to our conversation with Dr. Daren Martin. Before we dive into this week's episode, I wanted to share an opportunity that many business owners are already taking advantage of. Now, we're about to wrap up Q1. If you're feeling stuck or unsure about your next move in your business, there's still time to turn things around. That's where a clarity session comes in. This is a focused one-time strategy session with me personally, where we'll break down your biggest challenges, identify opportunities, and map out your best next steps for your business. You'll walk away with a clear action plan to move forward with confidence. Now, I want to make this clear from the get-go. This is not an ongoing consulting offer. You know your business best. This session is simply about giving you the clarity and direction you need to take action and make the rest of the year a success. Many entrepreneurs have already gained incredible value from those sessions, so don't miss out. Reach out to me now by emailing podcast@ptexgroup.com. I look forward to speaking to you and seeing how I could bring more clarity to your business. Dr. Daren Martin, thank you so much for joining me on the Let's Talk Business podcast.
I am so excited. We started this process a bit back, and it's finally coming to fruition. So I'm really looking forward to visiting with you and your listeners.
Sure. So some of the guests that come to the show is people that I know in the industry. Some people get referred through others. I think I reached out randomly to you because I've seen your content. I've followed some of the stuff, and I figured that this is a topic that our listeners are pretty familiar with. And we all struggle with. As leaders, we always struggle to get better at it. So I figured that bringing you onto the show would be our listeners will really appreciate the content. So thank you for making the time and being here with me today.
I'm thrilled to be here, and we're talking about my favorite absolute subject. So even better, bonus, I'm always up for talking about culture.
Very cool. So give us a little bit of a background. Obviously, you have a long history. You've been a bestseller author. You've been a speaker that's been traveling the world. Give us a little bit of the backstory of how you got to make culture the focal point of your career and something that you're passionate about teaching.
So I will back way up, but accelerate it. Through college, et cetera, I worked at Kroger for 4 years. I worked at a fast food place for 6 months. And then ultimately, and I did a lot of things. Then ultimately, I started and ran my own company for 20 years. And the reason I give some of that, because sometimes people that are advisors, consultants, haven't necessarily done anything in the business world. So with especially building a company from the ground up, up to around 50 people, I've laid awake at 4 a.m, worried about making payroll and some of those things that, a lot of folks can relate to. It wasn't till later, though, when I left that world and did go into consulting. I was fortunate to get on with a little boutique consulting firm. And I started going into Fortune 500, but even a few Fortune 50. I was at a very large defense contractor for a year and a half, sat next to the president. I was there a week a month working on basically their initiatives and culture. And as I say, over time, when you're in, I was in a big oil and gas company, $20 billion oil and gas company. When you're in those environments, and also a lot of mom and pops, you start to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's where the books came from. And the further into the work that I was doing, the more I came to see that culture is everything. When Gerstner, I don't know if you've read Who Says Elephants Can't Jump, but when Gerstner went to IBM, he made a very profound statement. He said, when I got there, I knew that culture was an important part of it, along with strategy and finances and all this other stuff. And he says in the book, halfway through, I realized I was dead wrong. Culture is not an important part of the game. He said, it is the game. If you don't change the culture, you don't change the company. So it's ironic that only 16% of executives say their culture is where it needs to be, when all this data says it ought to be the number one thing.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the nitty-gritty part of culture, and I think giving real-life examples for business owners to understand how they measure the temperature of their culture, and we'll talk about it. I want to just get you, on the surface level. There's a line I've been using, speaking to business owners, and even on this podcast, probably many times, as that line has been shared, which is when you speak to some people about culture, and you say, name a company that has a great culture, they'll mention Google because they have ping pong table and babysitting service. And they confuse culture with perks and stuff like that. In your definition, what is a good culture?
A good culture is a place where people actually want to come to work on Monday morning. There's a quote going around, I'm sure you've heard, I don't know the origin, but it says, culture is how you feel on Sunday night, right? And my definition of culture is it's the behaviors, the feelings, the words people use about your company and the results they produce. Culture is both a leading indicator, but it's also a trailing indicator. If people don't speak up in meetings, they're either bored or they're fearful, and it could be either one. So great culture to me, we can use historic, no longer valid necessarily examples, but Zappos, Patagonia. But the crazy thing is people go, yeah, well, those are boutique-y, that's a niche. It's harder for a different company. But I think In-N-Out Burger, for example, has amazing culture. And I could point to some of the things I believe they do to create that. But the Ritz-Carlton, so there is no respecter of culture or company size when it comes to culture. You can have a mom and pop with 6 people and a terrible culture. And you can have a 6,000 employee, deal. I was actually talking to somebody recently who said that and this was firsthand, so I give it a little validity, but that their friend works for Apple and says they love it. They absolutely love it. And I said, well, why do they love it? And he said, because they don't care when you work. If your cycle is you want to work at 4 a.m, you work at 4 a.m. I thought, wow, that's unique.
Interesting you mentioning, because you mentioned Apple, and I've had a very close friend in the tech business that actually visited Apple and visited Google on many occasions. And he said both companies have an amazing culture, but so different that you almost feel it in the air. You feel it in the air. You walk into that building, the campus, you feel it so different.
And I tell people this, it's palpable. I can walk into a store or a business and immediately get a read for what the culture's like. I'm sure you can as well. It's in the energy in the room and the way people do or don't greet you, the look of the place, all of that. And what people get, they do what I call copycat culture. Oh, Google does this, we should do that. No, your business might not be set up for that at all. That might be the terrible strategy. I'm at a company now, and I'm not exclusive to the oil and gas space, but I just happen to be a company that is in that space. And they drill. They're an investment fund, but they also do drilling. And I go out to the field where they're drilling. You can't do a Google culture with a bunch of, oil field drillers. In fact, some of their culture is about talking trash to each other and, things you would go, well, that's a terrible culture. And yet they love the company. They love the people they work with.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. And this is something our listeners would appreciate, because every company has a culture, even if you were definitive about creating a culture or not. It's not like there is some sort of culture. Even if you have zero effort towards culture, something developed there. And this is a mistake some business owners think. They say, you know what, now I'm going to start working on my culture. Guess what? There is a culture. You might want to work to change it but there is a culture out there.
Yeah.
So my question to you on that is, have you seen a lot of the examples you gave and a lot of the companies we use in case studies about culture? These are from the ground up, was developed with that mindset, with that vision from a leader, founder, that this is the type of culture I want to build. Have you seen leaders taking initiative and saying, you know what, I don't like where my culture is going. I don't like how the team feels about the company and the culture. I'm going to turn things around. Have you seen successful companies do that?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's the first C. I've got the 4 C's of company culture in my book, Architecting Company Culture. And the first C is call it by the right name. That's the hardest part for executives. Call it by the right name. And I say, if you want to know what's going on, get out of the suite and into the street. You got to go find, because in my experience, the larger the gap between the stated culture and the actual culture, the more dysfunctional the company. And I can't tell you how many leaders tell me, oh, we got a great company culture, but it's not evidenced out, right? So that's the start. We were, going into COVID, I got a call from my buddy Larry. Larry buys up old historic properties in Dallas and repurposes them for hotels or things. And he built this amazing, we'd been at the open house hotel that was like originally a Ramada Inn. He turned it into a art forward boutique, really trendy hotel. And in fact, it was named the top or the most Instagrammable hotel in Dallas. So he calls me up and says, hey, something's wrong. Can you come help me figure it out? So I said, sure. So I went in and, long story short, as they say, I interviewed the top 10 people, the leaders. And it was an absolute disaster. I called him. I said, Larry, not only do I know what's wrong, I know how to fix it. The guy at the top was running a boutique, fashion forward, art hotel with 1,000-piece original artwork, like it was a pawn shop. I'm like, dude, he's cutting corners. The controller, as it turns out, was stealing money, not depositing checks. The head of housekeeping told me, one of my leadership skills is I'm really good with the little people, at which point he was out in my brain, took a little bit. But the head of sales said, he was also the head of social media, and he said, social media can't help you, it'll only hurt you. And somebody'd come on and post a picture and say, hey, here's me at the pool, loving life. And they'd tag the hotel, and he'd come on and say, you got to take that down. So we came in, about half the people were gone for very good reasons, brought in a GM. That hotel in 15 months went from 57 on TripAdvisor to number 1. They won all sorts of awards because the owner recognized something's not right. Now, would the guy that was in charge have ever done that on his own? No. But have I seen leaders do that? It's few and far between, because we tend to stay in the bubble we've created for ourselves. But it absolutely can happen. And I love that. I love seeing something like that where somebody goes, hey, this isn't going well. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do an about face. So
let's continue, because you mentioned the 4 C's that you write in your book. We spoke about the first one. If you could touch on the other 3, just to give us a full picture of what is the makeup of a good culture.
So call by the right name, then you have to craft it. And I say all cultures happen by default or by design. I love your statement about you have a culture. I was in North Texas. A woman came on the radio and said, there's a lot of weather in North Texas today. And I'm like, there's always weather. That doesn't mean it's good weather or bad weather. Same thing with culture. And then you have to cast it. And of course, everybody's familiar with the old get the right people on the bus. But we don't often talk about, and I try to talk about it in the book, what are the right people? And what are the wrong people? And how does that fit for our particular culture? Someone can be wildly competent and successful, and yet like a complete fish out of water. I was at an oil and gas company. They hired a controller. He'd worked in Europe, and he didn't get it. He'd walk in all, European style, and he'd go out to the field and have a sweater tied around his neck at a refinery, and just have this air about him. And I thought he was brilliant. and could have really done some great things for the company, but he didn't last because he wasn't the right person and the right fit. And then the last thing is you have to cultivate it. You don't wind it up and just let it loose. It's something that you have to be on a regular basis. So that's the 4 C's.
Hey listeners, are you struggling to create beautiful looking proposals? Is it a hassle every time you need to prepare a quote or proposal for your clients? Is collecting signatures still a manual process? Well, it's time to upgrade to PandaDoc. At Ptex, we use PandaDoc for all our proposals, employee documentation, and so much more. It saves us time, keeps everything organized, and our documents look incredibly professional. With customizable templates, real-time collaboration, and e-signatures, PandaDoc turns creating documents into quick and easy steps. Plus, it integrates with so many other tools, streamlining your workflow and boosting productivity. Try PandaDoc today by visiting ptex.co/PandaDoc and start your free trial. Trust me, it's going to be a game changer for your business. That's ptex.co/PandaDoc. Let's talk about how to go about it in terms of a company. Let's say once there's an owner that wants to, obviously one of the places where a company feels the culture on two fronts. One, sometimes it actually shows up in the bottom line, just the company's not doing well, and they start figuring out why. Another bucket of places where it comes up is, employee retention. You start seeing that just there's a turnover of people, and you figure out why. You went through the recruiting process, you hired this great guy, but they're not lasting, and then they're finding out, okay, they were expecting a certain culture, but it's not there. Those are the two places I've seen culture show up. Have you seen any other places where culture shows up?
Well, let me comment on the one you just mentioned, because I always say, if you want to know if you have a great cultures don't need a recruiting department. I did a keynote for Select Medical, which is 50,000 employees, and it was their top 500 leaders, and they told me, "Oh, we got a great culture." I was like, "Okay," but I'm in the coffee line, and I'm talking to this young gal, and she said, "I love working at the company." I said, "Well, what do you love about it?" She goes, "Well, my grandma works there, my best friend works there, my sister works there, my neighbor." I'm like, "How did all those people come to work at the company?" She's like, "I told them, you got to come work here."
So true.
And that's, Patagonia mentioned earlier. I don't know if this is still the case, but would get 9,000 applications for every deal. Zappos, they used to line up around the block. So culture is a magnet when it's a place that people want to be a part of. If you are having to beg people to come work at your company, well, I'll give you another example. We'll go unnamed. It was one of the 5 fastest growing companies in the U.S. My buddy was the top sales guy there. He got a promotion and he quit. And I said, "Why did you quit? You're making money. You're one of the fastest growing companies." He said, "Daren, out of 450 salespeople, 450 of them hate the company."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my daughter was getting recruited by them, and she said, "I'm at the Austin location has a team of 7, and 5 of them are gone, and they're recruiting me to go." I'm like, "Baby, it's not worth it. It's not worth the money, right?" It's also reflected in how proud they are. They wear the swag when they're outside of the office. They're proud to wear the colors and the name. And I used to have a friend of mine in Dallas. She would introduce herself, and she couldn't wait her turn, and then she'd say, "My name is Kim, and I work for the mouse." She was clearly at Disney Corporation, and this is years ago. She loved it. That's an indicator. So this because you've been in the space, but the 3 things that get leaders' minds going is when I say attracting and retaining top talent, eliminating silos, and employee engagement. That's another big one, by the way. Low employee engagement, which is an epidemic around the world, is an indicator of culture.
So what would you say, as somebody listening to this and they want to first get a good temperature on their culture? What would be the couple of steps they could do as leaders to just even get a good read of where they're up to right now?
I would say go talk to people, go find out what's going on. The problem, you know as well as I do, is if the culture's not good and there's a culture of fear and other things, then they're not likely to tell you the truth as the leader, right? And this isn't a plug, but someone like you goes in, it's a very different scenario because for some reason they'll talk to an outsider and simply asking questions like, what do we say we do that we don't do? What do we say we don't do that we do? People want to talk about what's going on at their place of employment. But a good leader can also break through that. They don't have to do it from that angle. But the key is you got to find out the information. And a simple poll or assessment won't do that if it's a really bad culture, because you've heard it, the paranoia about, they're tracking who says what, But however you go about it, you do have to really understand what's going on and what's the reality.
I'll just share on that because you just mentioned it. I have a client of mine that took me for some sort of consultancy project. And one of the main reasons why they actually hired me was because they felt they're growing fast and they have great people, but they felt something is off with the culture. They didn't know what, and the real reason is, to credit the leader, is they were just a young leader that just didn't know what, they didn't sign up. They didn't know they're going to be growing that fast and hiring that fast a bunch of people from different backgrounds. And the first thing I did is I did one-on-ones with the top leadership team. That, I would say just bringing back that, that list of information to the leader was so valuable because that set the priorities for the company for the next 6 months. And we'll get to some of the ownership part that I know you speak in the book, but just having leaders of the team see that the leader is putting their requests as priorities for the company or their suggestions, just fire them up. And then everybody was like fired up to work together as a team. And it was amazing to see how just this little gesture, how to go about it, made such a huge change in literally 3 months.
Great leaders do that, and it is the lowest hanging fruit. There was a town hall at a company, and he's out there with the people, the CEO, one of the best CEOs I've ever experienced. And he's at a town hall, and they were talking about and these are people, as I said, closest to the valve, right? These are the ones out there doing the work. And someone raised their hand and said, hey, listen, this new healthcare plan, I think you need to know that that's costing my family an extra $4,000 a month, which was a very big deal. It's a big deal to anybody, but it certainly was to these folks. He said, and they kind of explained a little bit why. He said, you know what? I'm not familiar with that, but I will look into it and get back to you. By the next day, it had changed. It had gone back to what it was. Now, you don't think that built goodwill? Do you think they trust that leader? And I've seen people just get something done that it can be simple or it can be big, but go out. I recommended a refinery manager one time. I said, listen, the culture's bad. You don't have good communication. They're complaining about the right things, equipment being down, these things. I said, here's what you do. You go out there, you sit in the control room with them. What gives you headaches? What's the problem? And then fix something. And then come back and say, okay, we took care of that. Now what's next? I said, you will change the culture overnight. People want to be heard.
Yeah, one thing that's worse than not asking your team for feedback or understanding where the culture is by asking them and then not changing anything. And then seeing, okay, now I went above and beyond to share what's going on and zero change.
Now you lose all integrity, right? I agree. And I had a guy tell me one time he was sharing these ideas, and I said, man, you've got great ideas. We should be doing these things. He said, Daren, I turned my idea mill off a long time ago, because he would come and say, hey, we could fix this if we did this, and it just died on the vine. That's a great point.
So let's talk about, again, this is something that people look at it very differently. People think a good culture means that you need to spend money on your culture, which sometimes you do, but a lot of times it's way more than that. And people say, you know what, I don't have the budget as a Disney and a Zappos and or these companies that could invest so much in culture. I'll give an example. I know I've spoken to, the founder of Zappos. He's not with us anymore. At one point, we started off like a Twitter chat back and forth, and he prided himself that he focuses all his marketing budget into customer service. And one of the things he shared with me is I asked him, like, give me some examples. He said, we're the first company that will not have a person put down the phone if they have to be on the phone with you, no matter how long it is. Where most companies say an average, customer service rep has to be on 10 calls an hour, whatever it is. We don't have metrics about that. Now, I shared it publicly, and then there was a Q&A, and the person says, look, you need to have a budget for that. If you are in a shoestring budget and you have 2 CSRs, 2 customer service reps picking up phones, you don't want the phones to be, ringing and nobody's picking up the phone. So I guess my question to you is, how do you deal when you get those questions, when you speak or you go into a company and they say, you know what, in order to turn things around, it's going to cost a lot of money. What's your response to that?
I think that's sheer total nonsense. And I'm so glad. I wish I had gotten to talk to the great Tony Shee. By the way, one other little tidbit with that story is the longest record was someone was on the phone for 10 hours with the customer. I don't know what they were talking about for 10 hours. That seems a little excessive. But at any rate, it's not about money. It's about the will and the commitment to do the things that are most important. In fact, I've got a great study that I can reference that was done. They asked, what of these 5 things would you want that would help you be more successful at work? And it was things like more vacation time, better pay, better insurance program. And there was one item, the ability to get work done. The managers, out of a scale out of 6 items, ranked that dead last. Nobody's going to put that one. They don't care. The people doing the work, they rated that number 1. Now, that doesn't cost money, the ability to get work done, but it comes back to when people have agency and when they have encouragement or recognition, they'll go to the carpet for you, There's so many tangible, not costly ways to impact the culture. In fact, you really can't throw money at it to fix a culture, because you can spend a whole bunch of money and have not only no shift in culture, but people now feeling even more entitled and grumpy because, well, where's that doesn't last. So it's not about the money. It's about the will to recognize what people are, what's making them thrive. When people lined up for a Zappos job, it's a $12 an hour call center job. They could get one of those like that anywhere else. Why did they want to work at that company? Because it was what Tony created there with the culture.
Just adding what you just said, because I've heard it from many, we're involved in the marketing world in Ptex, and we do a lot of, we collaborate with a lot of companies that do large events and so on and so forth. And I've heard throughout the years with so many employees will say, you know what, we had this beautiful event, or we had this getaway, whatever it is, and all kinds of props and food and everything else. And like I heard it like one-on-one from employees that said, I wish my leader would just come over to me and say, thank me once in a while for what I've done. I don't need that lavish party. Like, this lavish party, them sitting in the front and we sitting in the back, and I have some food. That's not that I want my appreciation to show up once a year. And I think some business owners are just a little disconnected from what's happening in their own culture. And I think for our listeners on the show, I think the strongest part, just if you want to take away one thing so far, it is that you got to feel the temperature. You got to speak to your people and get the real temperature of how people feel about your company in order even to know what the next steps needs to be in your company.
Let's play a little game called Good Leader, Bad Leader. The great CEO I mentioned, we did a supervisor school every year. They'd bring in high potentials and they would have a lot of happy hours and things and after time. And he hung out. And he's a little bit of an introvert, but I would go get people and say, hey, Jim, that is a pipe fitter out in the refinery. Hey, have you met the CEO? No, I haven't met. Well, I'd bring him over and I'd introduce him, and Mike would be like, so tell me what's working, what's not working. They have a great conversation. Contrast that, the CEO that replaced him, I go to their location in, I think it was Cheyenne, and they were all grumpy when I got there after the Christmas season. And I said, what's going on? They said, well, the new CEO flew in on the corporate plane, which is no big deal. Mike would have done that. Flew in on the company plane, got up, made a 10-minute speech, walked back out, and got back on the plane and went back. There was that's a killer.
Sure.
That's the biggest thing you can do is invest in your people. If you are so bridled down as a leader making decisions, then that you can't talk to people and get them leveraging their smarts, their ability, then something's jacked up. Now, look, that happens sometimes with startups or things where it's an army of one, and it takes everything's on you. So I'm not criticizing that of people in that spot, but the greatest change comes from building trust and then getting people to be honest with you. That's Mullally, when he came into Ford Motor Company. I was glad to share the stage with him years ago. Phenomenal guy. He was named one of the top 3 leaders. He turned Ford around, but he built it first by building trust. And then the people started doing the work because they'd been held back for so long, just ruled in a tyrannical way. And he built trust. And then they're like, hey, we know how to fix this.
Oh.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
So let me ask you, because I know that the title of your book, and you've been around, speaking on the concept of company of owners. So there's one thing about having a great culture. I think company of owners is a whole new level. It's the next level. So talk to me. Is it even possible to have a company of owners?
Yeah. So, I always want to point out, because people say, oh, well, we have an ESOP or we do that. I'm like, no, I'm talking about attitudinally, not necessarily, your name's on the deed. But that was born out of a conversation I had with the COO of a $20 billion company. And I said, Dave, you need to fire your employees. And he said, what are you talking about, Martin? So you called me Martin. By the way, this guy also called consultants blood-sucking leeches.
Oh, wow.
And I told him, dude, I'm one of those. He's like, I'm not talking about you, Martin, And he also said company culture was a phrase that a consultant made up to sell more business. I'm like, oh, my God. Anyway, the ironic thing was he really did invest a lot in the culture. He just didn't know that's what he was doing. But I said, yeah, you need to fire all your employees. And I said, you don't want employees. You want people who act like owners. A little light bulb went off. And the rest is history. He had me speak on it and then do this thing. And then I thought, man, this is getting a lot of traction. So I wrote the book, Company of Owners. And that thing has been perennial. I mean, I was thinking the other day, it's 8 years old now, but it's still going strong, because what executive doesn't salivate about that? So I'll have people ask me, well, how do you get people to act like owners? And I say, treat them like owners. That's the shorthand. There's a lot more to it than that. But most people go to a job where they have very little decision-making authority, very little input, very little interest. And it kind of goes back to, I think, the Industrial Revolution, where work got reduced down to one deal. You come to work, you do what I tell you, and I'm going to give you some money. And that's it. That's our agreement. And when we reduce it down to that, then people die on the vine. So when you give people, I've seen people at companies, no real formal education, but with some incredible thinking skills and other things, given some authority, and just watch them thrive. They will die for that company because somebody has recognized them. I always say that culture is super easy. And then I follow that up quickly with culture is really, really hard. Having a company of owners is really, really easy. But having a company of owners is also really, really hard because you got to get rid of a lot of ego and hubris and, to trust people and to empower them to do their job. You can't want somebody to act like an owner and then there's bureaucratic roadblocks at every turn or half the equipment's broken. People just get sucked down by that. But it's not a pipe dream. It's actually a reality.
So what is the makeup of that? So obviously, building trust and giving people autonomy is obviously part of that. What would you say? On the lack of time, obviously, people could read your book, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what are the other ways you could say quickly? Like, where are the places where a leader could spend some time in order to create that company of owners?
I think one of the key things is, most mission statements aren't worth the paper they're written on. I talk about in the book, you want a business actionable mantra, and I'll point to two companies. Ritz-Carlton. Their mantra is, we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, right? That covers everything. If I'm washing dishes, am I washing this like someone with some pride in my work? And am I washing it for people who I care about, I treat like? But it is also the same at In-N-Out Burger. When In-N-Out Burger opened here in Texas, my daughter wanted to go, and I said, baby, it's going to be. So we got there. Line was long, but it went like that. And I got up to the front, and I said, how are y'all doing this? She said, oh, no, you don't understand. When we open a new location, half the people you see here are from California. They're experienced, and we come in and we train our counterparts. Now, what fast food company does that, right? They just throw them in there, give them a couple days or maybe a couple hours, and then go to work. They ended up doing $250,000 their first month in burgers, right? But when I talk about the business actionable mantra, they also have a great one that is, we sell fresh food created in a pristine environment served with a smile. I know everything I need to know. If they really live that, and I have a bad tomato that looks kind of bad, I throw it in the trash can. I don't ask the manager, can I throw this tomato away? I've been told. So sometimes it's just, we don't give people the rails of, as long as you're operating within this. I was getting married and I was buying a bunch of wine, and the gal at Trader Joe's said, wait, she came running back and gave us, this huge bouquet of roses. These are for y'all. Didn't ask the manager, didn't do, that's culture. That wasn't a one-off. They've been instilled to do whatever you need to do to take care of people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Let me ask you, have you seen anything like some sort of pitfall when companies are trying to improve their culture? Like things for, let's say, leaders listening to this, if they want to improve their culture, what to be on the lookout not to do or to do slowly?
So if it's disingenuous, if it's viewed as disingenuous on the part of the people there, oh, they're just doing that for this reason. And the reality is, it could be that that's the case, but it may not be. You have to be patient, because you can't turn most of these ships just like overnight. It's not magical. You can wave a wand and say, we're going to have a great culture. People are going to be suspicious. Why are we doing this? So the key is to demonstrate it in some really significant ways where people say, wow, we're serious about this. And that could be, burning some sacred cow in the middle of the office and just saying, this is done. And you take a hammer to it and destroy it. Whoa, people are like, oh my, that thing has made my life hell, It is about the process of getting there's people that get on board immediately, but then there's those have to see the proof in the pudding, and you got to follow that process. Don't give up too early. That would be my quick thing. Don't give up too early.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to culture is the same way we said that you need to ask feedback before you start improving the culture, is within the process, figure out what are the places where you're going to get feedback if you're seeing improvement. So sometimes you say, oh, I think I spent some effort, some time, and all of a sudden everything is fixed. on the patient side at the same time is get the feedback to see if they're seeing the improvements.
I'll tell you a quick one that can have far-reaching, eliminating, I'll say with malice, but I don't want to be too over the top, poison and low performance. Low performance, you either train them up or manage them up, manage them out, you know. I can't tell you how many companies I've walked into where everybody knows who the problem people are. You know, either they're poisonous or so. My process that I would encourage people to follow is that you start at say, here's where we've been and who we've been, and here's how we've operated, and here's who we're going moving forward. This is how things are going to be different. But if you say that and coming to work every day is still the same, that doesn't happen. And when you've got someone who is a constant drain on other people in the company and negative, and I'd have a very serious conversation about this changes, and I've seen it happen, by the way. This changes now, or you will not be here come Friday. And then people go, oh, they're serious. That was a senior person. That was our top sales producer. But they're so toxic that, it's just bringing the whole company down.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share a story on that. I was working with the business owner that actually originally called me in that he needs to, he has this toxic salesperson, but is the top performer. And it just is sucking all his energy, like every single day. Everything is an issue. Everything around him is an issue. And he couldn't make up his mind, like what to do with this guy. And we were going through a couple of meetings. I met with this guy a couple of times and I said, you know what? This is not going to be fixed. It's just a matter of, it's your company. You could decide. And at one point he made that decision. He let the guy go. That same day, he sent out an email. The same day, towards the end of the day, one of his people asked him for a quick meeting. And he gave him that meeting. To that meeting, 4 people show up and walk into the meeting, 4 other salespeople. And they say, we know how hard it was for you to do this, but we also know how toxic he was for the culture. Tell us how much he produced the last 12 months, and we commit right now, we'll make up for that, for taking the bravery and doing that.
Many. I love that story. And, I was at a place and they had the top operations guy that had management by screaming and yelling obscenities at people and would tell, and I worked on that, and I finally got him out of there. The guy they replaced him with, which, was perfect. They had posters up around the plant with his picture on it saying hope, like those old Obama style posters. I swear to you, that culture changed overnight. You could feel it when you walked in now that the ding dong the witch is dead, right? But I used to have a professor say, how much cow dung does it take to spoil a bowl of ice cream? And when I have big rooms of leaders, CEOs, whatever, I say, how many poisonous people does it take to destroy a company? And the conclusion they always come to is just one, right?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's such a great story, Meny. I love that. Way to go, too, by the way, because it did take a lot of courage from that leader, but I'm sure that paid big dividends.
It took a toll on him. It took a couple of months, but what I liked about it is how it ended up, because you think sometimes it's a decision between you and that guy. You don't know that everybody's watching and everybody's waiting. What will you do? What will you do as a company, as a leader?
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. Let's talk about how people could find out more about what you do, about your books. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So, well, I'm gonna give you the shortest way, but Daren, Daren, you have to spell my name right, Daren at DarenMartin.com. So that's my direct email. That is my website. Heck, I've been doing this when I speak and sometimes to very large groups, and almost nobody takes me up on it, but I'll even give out my phone number if you think that's okay.
Sure.
If you want to reach out, 469-471-5548. The books, my Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller, Company of Owners. Of course, it's available on all the outlets. It may not be in the Barnes & Noble, but it's on there, or Barnes & Noble. Wait, that's the one that survived, right? Yeah, it's Borders. But it'll be in there, like if you can get it off the Walmart website, et cetera. But, there's always the 1,000-pound gorilla, Amazon, or reach out to me if you want to do something. I've got some companies that buy hundreds of copies every year that they give to all their employees. So I'm very easy to find. If you Google me, because my parents spelled my name with one R and an E, I'm like the first 8 pages. I'm like, thank y'all for not using the standard spelling of my name.
So likewise, people ask me why I spell Meny with an E. I said, if I spell it with an A, there's a ton of Google results. If you spell it with an E, not a lot of results that come up.
Hey, in this day and age, the more odd your name, the better, because you can own the social media that you're, if you're in the public.
Sure. For the links to resources mentioned in this episode, check out the show notes at www.ptexgroup.com/podcast, where we'll link to the books that we discussed and ultimately to our guest's website. Let's close with a 4 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Ready. Wait, Meny, let me say one more thing. I'm going to give you a free digital book called An Evolution at Work that you can post, and people can just go to your site or your deal and get a free book. I'll make sure.
Beautiful. We'll actually link it. We'll link it in the show notes. Let's close with the 4 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Ready.
Number 1, a book that changed your life.
The E-Myth Revisited.
My first book and the first guest on this podcast, Michael Gerber, a great friend.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Number 2, a piece of advice you got that you'll never forget.
People say life is too short to. I don't care how short it is. If it's 1,000,000 years, don't spend a second of any day doing something that sucks your soul. Live your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says.
Beautiful. Number 3, anything you wish you could go back and do differently.
A whole lot, except that I don't live with regrets because I'm where I am today because of that broken road. So no.
Beautiful. Last and final question. What's still on your bucket list to achieve?
I want to speak in a stadium sometime. Like, I had end of the year, I closed out with Kubota, which was 3,600 people. That's a big room. I say I want that. I probably don't actually want that, but oh no. And I've got a Wall Street Journal USA Today. I'd love to get an New York Times bestseller at some point as well.
Cool. Daren, thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is valuable. That is why in the name of our listeners, we'll forever be grateful for sharing some of your time with us today. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here. Thank you. I'm glad we made this happen. And, let's commit to each other that this relationship doesn't end here. It's going to go on. So
exactly. Thank you. That's my conversation with Daren Martin. My takeaway from this one, number 1, spend time with employees in various roles to understand the day-to-day challenges and successes, showing genuine interest in their work and listening to their insights. Number 2, offer employees the autonomy and decision-making power so they feel like an owner. Recognize their potential to contribute to the company's success and trust them with more responsibility. Number 3, develop a clear, actionable plan that reflects the values and the goals of the company. This helps employees understand and align with the company's vision and mission. Number 4, implement a system of recognition to motivate employees. A simple thank you or public acknowledgement of their hard work can significantly boost morale. And number 5, understand that culture is more about how employees feel and how engaged they are rather than just perks. Cultivate an atmosphere where employees look forward to coming to work and are proud to contribute to your business. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Let's Look Business podcast. I hope you enjoyed the practical, no-nonsense advice that our guest shared. If you found value in listening, I would be so grateful if you could share the episode with your friends, and if you could give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever platform you listen. Subscribe to the show and get notified every time we publish a new episode. The Let's Look Business podcast is a Ptex Group original production. Until next time, make it a great day.